All right, next up is Bob Noseworthy, who is going to talk to us about the OFA logo program development.
All right, well, first off, I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller. Actually, I've been involved with OFA probably for 8 years or something like that. This is the 10th conference, so first time I can finally show up. Usually Rupert Dance gets to have this role, but fortunately the IBTA is having their event this week. I'm the technical Sherpa at the University of New Hampshire's Interoperability Laboratory, Bob Noseworthy, and we'll get to it. So I'm going to try to quickly go over a product pitch. My product is OFED. That's what we are contracted to work with for the OpenFabrics Alliance to help promote and support the adoption and viability of the software stack through interoperability validation. So we're going to go through a little bit of how the program's working today and how it might evolve in the future. A little bit about why we're the folks doing this. The IOL has been involved in interoperability testing for 25 years. A little shameless promotion. We did get the IEEE SA Corporate Award last year. 12th recipient, I think, is the 13th, 12th, one of those. And I've been involved in the Ethernet space at least for 18 years. So I know a few things about Ethernet. Haven't been as involved with InfiniBand, but I think there's some folks here who know that. Little historical note there, we did have a brief IWARP consortium at our lab before our OFA involvement, and as the OFA effort grew, the IWARP consortium sort of got subsumed by our OFA activity. So what is going on with the logo program today? This is somewhat of a rehash of what Woody presented from the EWG update. Really just a quick overview. Of course, we're testing the 3 different RDMA technologies. We're testing a wide variety of ULPs that are currently defined by the test plan. The test plan is developed by the OFA IWG, the Interoperability Working Group, I'll get it right. And that's all driven by OFA member contributions, right? So if there's a aspect of a ULP that isn't being tested here, we want your input. And just on that note, I have noted here the optional ICER and RDS. We have test plans for that, but we don't see a lot of involvement with vendors wanting to test bringing in targets for that. And I do expect that to change here in the coming months. And also, just so it's not overlooked, we do have our thanks to give for the various current members, be they Chelsea, DDN, Emulex, IBM, Intel, Mellanox, NetApp. Hopefully no one's forgotten from that list. Again, what our cluster is, it's not 2,000 nodes of hex core systems with fantastic FDR interconnect. It's a Franken cluster. It's probably 20 different types of hosts. We have 45 hosts total, thereabouts, with every type of memory and PCIe from 1 to 3.0. Yeah, not what you would necessarily want to deploy uniformly, but this is what we're about. We're trying to validate that we don't see a problem with different architectures, different HCAs, different RCAs, etc. Last logo event, we just published the list. It's actually going up, and most list recipients are on the list now. It was started in January, and we're a little over 8,000 tests performed to validate that OFED 3.5. That's the topology we happen to use. And again, it's not 2,000 nodes necessarily, but it is a representative small sample of different interconnect. Each box here is a different device, a different HCA from either the same vendor or different vendors. All right, so what is the logo program? Obviously, we have a definition document, talks about what the rules of engagement are. Much of this activity is confidential until the participants decide to go ahead and publish, right? So we encourage products to come to us in whatever state so that they can get debugged, as well as help contribute value to the OFED development itself. So what can be on the logo list? Everything you'd expect, HCAs, RNICs. Recently, in the past year or so, we've added Rocky, of course, so RCAs. InfiniBand switches with or without subnet managers. What perhaps is obvious with IWARP, Ethernet switches are a non-issue, right? With Rocky, we want to be a little bit more mindful of the data center bridging support and basically congestion avoidance features, whether it's PFC, QCN, if anyone ever implements it, features. And so hopefully we'll see growth in this space of actual Ethernet fabric switch providers participating in the LOGO program. And then there's a wide variety of storage target solutions. A lot of activity from NetApp and DDN traditionally. Certainly would love to see other storage providers participating. Gateways are active. But there's a third set here. It's servers. And we have seen slow, but fortunately recently growing adoption of server vendors coming to us saying, validate my system. Whether it's validating the system running OFED or running a variant, whatever fork, and showing that it's still compatible with the OFED distro that we're working on developing. So the debug testing is generally done against an RC. The actual logo testing is done against a GA. So we have an interop debug event actually starting next week, and I think that'll be, help me out, Ed, RC1, most likely, yeah, unless some miracle happens. Proper shout out to Edward Mossman, who actually runs our cluster back there. Give a wave, Edward. Hey. So what have we recently done? Of course, Rocky's been added. And we've seen system providers and end station providers. I'll speak more to bridges in a moment. But also in this space, we're seeing interest through various other channels for ICER targets and such, and encouraging those vendors to actually participate in the program. And I do expect to see more server validation than what we've classically seen. We've seen a lot of support from the Intels, Mellanoxes, whatnot for the card, of course. I'd like to see more server integration. What's the list look like? Well, you can go to the website and see all the past lists. Anyone have any guess how long we've been doing it? I sort of gave it away at the beginning. Was it 8 years? Well, the logo list has actually been going around for 7 years as far as how long we've been publishing. The 15th list, I think, is posted here. We're working on the 16th starting next week. And it just gives you the example, the firmware version, the version of the product that was tested, what speeds, FDR, et cetera, for the technology. And the report is fully available for download in your review. Right? So it tells you what was tested, how well did it work. If you don't have the time to download every single report, we're finally starting a summary report. So you can download and review what was accomplished, what protocols were looked at, what type of issues were uncovered, OFED feedback, that sort of thing. So this summary report can give you a high-level overview of what the logo program's working to achieve, and certainly help you understand what the program's benefits are. So I encourage you to look for that. On this note, who here uses the logo list? Who here has a product on the logo list? There has to be a few people who have some hands up. Thank you. Yes. Obviously, with somewhat of a focus on the hardware vendors, I would expect those people to be raising their hands. But end users, applications, national labs, I don't expect you to send us products, but I expect you to be interested in the results of this logo list. So if you aren't looking at it, what do we need to do to add capability, functionality, further validation to make it even more valuable to you? If you aren't aware of it, what do we have to do to make you better aware of it, right? Beyond these annual talks. So how can we continue to make it better? The ideas I'm going to walk through are my own. We will every 2 weeks talk amongst the IWG as far as new additions, new developments, new requirements. With OFILG members and OFA IWG members' feedback, we try to improve the program continuously. Since we do these events twice a year, we have an interop debug event followed by a logo event, and then 6 months later we repeat that process. Generally, there's this cyclical process of trying to update the program. But we need your feedback. We need to hear from the end users, application developers, what type of ULPs are we currently missing? Is SMCR something we should be adding? What is most relevant to give you feedback that OFED is providing the proper base level of compatibility with the logo list's validation work. Again, for clarity, the OFILG is a subset of OFA membership, so it's only those members who actually can get their logo or get the OFA logo on their product. But any OFA member can be part of OFILG. They just have to go through the application process. So one item for me, being an Ethernet guy, like what can we do better with Rocky bridging? At the moment, we have a lot of focus on the end stations, and while there may be recovery mechanisms for packet loss as are necessary, we really need data center bridging to have the throughput and low latencies that we'd be expecting. So where in the world can we expect to have validation of data center bridging and actual fabric technologies, right? There's much more that needs to be done in Ethernet than run spanning tree. Dear God, I know no one's using that. So what do you use in your cluster? Something proprietary, most likely? Or are you actually moving to standards-based? Does anyone here currently run Trill in your cluster? Anyone? Bueller? No. So this is the problem with the fabric validation at the moment. The standards aren't widely deployed, and whatever you do have in-house is presumably some proprietary version from your bridge provider. So how much of this do we need to validate in the logo program? Maybe it needs to mature more. Maybe we just need to have some bridge vendor drive their interest. This one should be easy. I think we can all guess the company that should be involved, and I would welcome VMware's participation in trying to further validate the virtualization of RDMA as that technology becomes viable. And certainly we heard earlier today that that should be soon. So look forward to adding that to the logo program. Heard this comment for years as far as we should be testing this distro or that distro. What we've typically focused on is either Scientific Linux or CentOS. We have on occasion used Red Hat or, yes?
I should have spoken up before.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
You have to be a member of OpenFabrics to participate. You don't have to be a promoter. Sometimes people assume that you have to have a highest level membership. In fact, I had to recently check, and there's no requirement for any specific level of membership to be in the program.
Correct. You don't, correct. As long as you're an OFA member of any level. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jim. And we need your feedback, and we need your input. So whatever your interests are, please either just share it with the list, and we'll have information on that coming up, or participate in the calls, participate in our events. Like I said, twice a year, we have an interop debug event that's generally attended, and people are working through their issues. So certainly encourage all of that activity. On the distro topic, simply comes back to once upon a time, we had our Franken cluster running probably 5 different distros in Microsoft and Red Hat and SUSE and SL. It becomes quite a matrix to try to run through in a limited time. So we've simplified, having a little bit more of a homogeneous operating system environment while looking at heterogeneous hardware, but certainly can look at heterogeneous operating systems or wholesale shift to something like SUSE. What we look to, though, is for those distros to support us better so that we can get what we need out of them as far as support, licensing, bug fixes, attention, that sort of thing. This one's a little bit obvious. As things get faster, they present new challenges to the applications, lower latencies. We need to validate that the applications work at higher speeds. The problem that that presents for us is we need to keep the cluster up to date. And it's largely a volunteer effort from the various supporting members of the OFA, where Intel or AMD or HP have contributed hardware over the years to keep our equipment current. So offhand, I couldn't say how many systems we have that are PCI Gen 3, but it's certainly not every single one of them. So as we get faster, we want to look at keeping the hardware underlying as current as possible. And it's really through those donations that keep this program affordable. One thing that you might have assumed, but isn't actually part of the program, performance. The logo program is about validation that the protocols are functional, that the RDMA interaction for whatever the transport is viable with the OFID stack that we're evaluating. There's no bar that says so-and-so didn't perform well enough so they don't get the logo list. Should there be? Right? It's an open question. We debated it heavily in the beginning of the program, and as adoption picks up, we certainly can readdress whether performance should be added. Another big one, NVM. Obviously, it can change how RDMA is used, especially as larger and larger persistent memory sets are potentially transported across RDMA. We're currently at the lab working with the NVMe Express organization. They just changed their name on the 18th. However, What OFA does with that organization and how we add that to the logo program is yet to be defined. I mean, certainly there might be some aspects that are transparent from an end user's perspective. We just see faster performance, faster speeds. But if there's any aspects of upper layer protocols or further validation that NVM is operating as expected, perhaps there's a performance requirement to make sure that some minimum threshold is being met, right? So things to consider, not being done today. We need your input. Another example, IPv6. I hear we've run out of addresses. So if we're going to use IP, what are we going to do about IPv6? Currently, we don't do that in the program, but we could easily add in some areas IPv6 validation, and in other areas, it may be a little bit more challenging. So when or if there's a drive from the industry, we're happy to react to that drive. And more. No, we don't have 2,000 nodes. I've got 45 servers at the moment. Should we take advantage? And we've had various opportunities, be it from Pivotal or from other organizations, to try to leverage large clusters, downtime on large clusters, to try to do a little bit of OFED work. That's something that could still be considered if scalability is still seen as something that is critical to be part of the logo program. Failover of HCAs, other ULPs, I throw the file system luster up there as one example, but anything that we're currently lacking from the program that an end user feels should be validated as part of OFED so that it causes you less pain as you go to deploy. And now a couple brief words on the program's scope being interop focused rather than conformance focused, right? So from the get-go, we decided that the OFA logo program would validate the interoperability of the RDMA transports with the OFED software stack and the upper layer protocols, and not stress the conformance aspects because there's many other groups, many other areas where that's being addressed. If you can read that eye strain chart, that's an example of some of the different areas where some of these relevant technologies are being done. Obviously, IBTA is looking at conformance for the IB transports. IBTA may, this is my forward-looking statement, may look at RoCE conformance in the not too distant future. IWARP, as I mentioned at the beginning, we had a small IWARP consortium that developed some conformance tools that are available to the industry and I think are still in use in some cases to validate conformance of those RFCs. And then the whole host of whether it's DCB or Trill for Ethernet fabrics, IPv6, NVMe, etc. Obviously, the lab has been involved with this, for many years, but I'm sure there's others that aren't on the list here that still warrant attention. But there's many interconnected technologies, and I am in no way suggesting that all of these need to be part of the logo program. But as I've highlighted on the right, perhaps we need to add some more to the bridging validation for Ethernet. Perhaps we need to add some IPv6. And perhaps we need to do something with NVMe beyond simply utilize it in the system. The logo program actually going so far as to validate some aspect of the NVMe support within the platform. So again, here to solicit your feedback, your involvement, share your ideas and your needs. I think virtualization, from my perspective, is probably one of the top tickets, but maybe I'm wrong. Help us set those priorities by getting involved with the IWG. And as Jim reminds us, it's any level of membership in OFA can participate in the IWG. So go ahead and get involved. And you all have homework. I'm from a university. You're supposed to expect homework. Come on. There's a survey I've thrown together that really just goes over the questions in this slide deck and try to gather feedback. What stirs your brain as far as, oh yeah, he's right, maybe we should do that, or you have a new thought. Take a moment, fill out the survey, and at your request, I can share that with the IWG or not. I mean, certainly happy to take questions here in a moment, but maybe you'll have some time on your flight home to think about this and get online and fill out the survey. Details, how to get involved to the mailing list, when the next IWG call is. I believe it's next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 Pacific. Our various links to the logo list and such. And that's my presentation on the OFA logo program. And before I take questions, another shameless self-promotion. I'm full of tongue twisters at the moment. We do have a training program that we work with the OFA as well for the RDMA programming as well as system administration, and some classes in May are coming up if anyone's so interested. I know some of the attendees here have actually been through the class. But outside of the logo program or training, any questions? If not, I'm very thankful for your time. Yeah, sorry.
Pretty quick. Are the distros supporting you as well as you like? Because we've heard from them before that
Yeah.
they like to get things standardized and move off a little bit. So that
Currently, there are no distros who are members of the OFA interoperability logo group, and to be honest, that's what helps fund the work, and that helps drive the ship. There have been past interest and involvement from the various distros I mentioned, and as I said, we have used Canonicals, Red Hats, and SUSEs in past interop debug events and logo events. But part of the challenge does literally come down to when we hit a problem, we need to go to a dedicated resource. When we hit a problem, how do we get it fixed, analyzed? And some of the, I think, just the minutia of getting the licensing and that sort of stuff. I mean, we could work through that through other channels. But with all those questions unanswered, it was just easier for us as the IWG, not our lab, but the IWG made this decision probably 2 years ago that we would settle on, I think, what is it, largely Scientific Linux? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So do you have tests that validate the interop between different OFA versions?
That's one bullet I don't have on the slides, but the question was, do we have tests that validate functionality between different OFED versions? And it has been raised as a question in the past, but currently not our focus. Again, we typically look at the most recent GA as what we're testing, but just as much as we may want to look at heterogeneous operating system validation, we could look at heterogeneous OFED distributions, whether it's 1.5 to 1.5x or some other slight upgrade path within a cluster. Valuable input is just a matter of what's a meaningful way to structure that and add that into the program. Part of the challenge, right, if we have 10 new HCAs, new firmwares, new hardware, whatever it is, we don't necessarily want to take those newer products and put them on the older distro. So it's really just a matter of resources and make sure we have enough provided from the different participants to have an old cluster and a new cluster, that type of thing. Workable. Just comes back to how much interest there is in that. Any other questions? I think we might be just about out of time maybe, but all right. Thank you very much.